Welcome back to the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm your host, flying solo today, Susan Hobson. Our friend Rob is away in Costa Rica right now, knee deep in his own personal development and growth initiative. He's at a retreat this week. I'll be out of town next week on mine, so you'll have him solo next time. But to get this party started, I have to introduce my guest today because I have been so looking forward to this interview for some time, ever since we first came up with the idea of bringing him on. Franklin Swann, he is the CEO of Swann's Furniture, a 125-year-old family business running out of Texas down in the United States. And he also is the host of the World Needs Men podcast, which we're going to hear more about in a second. But Franklin, welcome to the show, buddy.
Excited to be here.
Woo! I know you are. We have so much that we can't wait to share with my audience. So let's get this party started for real. Why don't we start off by you telling my audience a little bit about yourself? And yeah, just a little bit of the backstory, right? Behind like who you are, what mission you're on in the world, and how you came to be on that mission.
This has been a pretty awesome journey. So a little bit about me, married to my best friend, Brooke. We actually met in New Zealand, studying abroad, been married 17 years and have two amazing kids. And life is full and life is fun and just really rich right now. I run a 128-year-old family business, and which is pretty incredible experience. We have a pretty amazing team, and just get to do some really fun work every day with that, and live in Texas and just do my thing. But my heart really is helping, serving, and really been on a journey working with you over the past couple of years now that's really brought us to this place where I'm able to see the opportunity to serve men who I feel like I'm called to step in and lead, and really through sharing my own story and my own journey, and really just talking about some of the dark spaces that I've been in and found my way out of, just in the hope and attempt to speak to other men who may be in the same space and not sure of how to get out and not sure of what to do. And when we find other men who have been in that same space and experienced some of those same things, and they got out, well, maybe there's hope for me too. And so I just am beginning to step into this really calling that I feel very profoundly on my life, to not just run a business, but to really figure out how do I step out and serve the world in a really meaningful way.
I know my audience is definitely at the edge of their seat now, wanting to hear some of this backstory, right? In terms of how you came to find this calling, right? At this age and stage of your growth trajectory. So let's rewind the game tape a little bit for our folks, shall we? Let's go all the way back to maybe not the beginning, but certainly to some of the most significant events that led you through my door in the first place.
Yep. There's a piece of running an old family business, and I've talked to other people about this, and it's like, oh, must be nice. And it is. And there's a flip side to everything, right? And so, leading a very old family business also comes with its fair bit of pressure. And there's always been this piece in the back of my mind that's thought, well, am I going to be the one that crashes the plane? And is everything going to go down on my watch?
Right.
That's and and there's not a whole lot of training on how to deal with that pressure. And so, what brought me here was the result of a downward journey, not knowing how to manage showing up as a great husband, showing up as a great father, and showing up as a great business leader, and navigating just the ups and downs and the pressure and the stress and the anxiety that comes with that and the overwhelm and the loneliness a lot of times, especially with the business, and just getting to this place where pretty much hit rock bottom. And I go into it in the podcast and talk about the origin story, but I just hit this space, this very dark space that took me time to get to. But I looked up one day and just had God speaking into my life and going, what's next? Are you going to continue down this trajectory? And I don't know how much detail you want me to give on that. Like,
As much as you feel called to share, because I want to tell you right now, I can feel my audience is resonating with this. You're speaking to a room full of leaders who definitely resonate with everything you just described. Emotionally is what leaders often feel. It is lonely at the top. That saying is not just trite, it is true. And with that comes the overwhelm, the anxiety, right? Like all of that can land as powerlessness and really destabilizing a leader is not such an uncommon experience now, is it? So yeah, as far as you want to go and as deep as you want to go, this is your podcast. So you take us where you want to be in this driver's seat, because I know that for me, it's the thing I've been trying to figure out for the last 15 years is how do I get my leaders to the table without having to hit the brick wall going 100 million miles an hour or having to slam their head up against the glass ceiling, which also hurts oh so much.
yeah.
But it's unfortunate that pain often needs to be the catalyst that awakens us to our untapped potential, isn't it?
It can be the thing. So, okay. So here we go. Step into the family business, and there begins to build this pressure inside of me of trying to lead the business, of trying to figure things out. We were going through some challenging times as a company. We were moving locations. We were just going through a lot of turmoil. At the same time, we opened a new location for our company, the only location we have. So we moved our whole business, and this is a 50,000-foot building, so not an insignificant, endeavor. So we build this new building, move in, and within a week or two of opening this business, we also have our first child. So there's this piece of me when I'm at the business, I feel very guilty that I'm not at home. And when I'm at home, I feel very anxious and stressed that I'm not at the business driving it forward and trying to get it back off of the ground. And there's this pressure that started building. And initially, my way of coping and trying to just process all of the stress was through physical training, through workouts. So I started doing marathons, and then those weren't enough. And so I started doing ultra marathons, and those just didn't seem to be working. So I started doing these boot camps. I did a deal called SEAL Fit Kokoro Camp that was 50 hours long. I did these things called Go Ruck, all in this attempt, looking back, to just process out all that stress and anxiety. And I got to this place. I would come to the office every day, and I would bring a backpack. No one knew what was in the backpack. I had 5 undershirts that I would bring every day because I was sweating so bad all day long that the anxiety had built up so bad that it was coming out as a physical manifestation, and I would sweat, and I would have to change out those undershirts every couple of hours. Otherwise, you would literally see these giant sweat marks going almost all the way down to my belt. So that's just how much anxiety there was inside me.
Right.
And I just didn't have any answers. I didn't have any way of dealing with that. And, my internal rules said, well, you can't take this stress out on your family. I'm not going to go home and be a belligerent husband. My rules also said, well, you can't just go crawl into a bottle and drink this away. So what became my answer one night, in just a complete moment of just desperation, I went out into my garage. I balled up my fist, and I just began punching myself as hard as I could. And that's the only answer I had. It's all I could figure out to do. I felt so overwhelmed, so inadequate, so unworthy, had so many stories built up over a long period of time that just it all came to this point where that's the best thing I had.
Mm-hmm.
And that just became my coping. That wasn't just a one-time thing. That was just kind of every night. And when I would just get so upset and mad at myself and frustrated and confused, and I would just go out, I would sneak out and do that.
Because
I
there's
hid it.
shame to it,
Oh,
right?
and every time you do that, the shame just deepens and the guilt and you just feel more worthless every time you do that. And it would almost create this like emotional hangover where it would just be this darkness that would be over me for a couple of days. And what looking back at it, I was able to hide it so well because I don't bruise.
Lucky you.
Right? I mean, there's a
Right?
lot of things that are hard to hide. Well, when you're doing this, you can hide it when you don't really show any physical signs of it,
Right.
but it's there energetically and it's there emotionally, even though it might
Mm-hmm.
not, and even spiritually, even though you might not see it physically. So one night, I come inside and I see my little boy. At the time, he's 3, walking across the hallway in our living room, and I see him in this moment get mad at himself, and he hits himself. And this just crushing moment comes over me, and I think, oh God, I am bringing this into my home.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't see it, but he is picking it up energetically.
Mm-hmm.
And it just rips my heart out. But I still didn't have any answers. Like I still was so just wrapped up in this. And so it wasn't but a few nights later, I'm in the garage. Every time I go out, it's just getting worse. And it's just being brought into my home. And I'm in the middle of one of those moments, and God's voice, as clear as day, comes into my heart and my mind, and it just says, what's next? A really simple question. What's next? And I knew intuitively that was very clear. If I continued down this path, because it's getting worse and worse and worse, and if I continued that on that trajectory, I would look up one day and suicide would be the logical answer if I carried it out far enough.
Mm-hmm.
And God just stopped me dead in my tracks and just gave me a very simple question. And it was in that moment that I knew that even though I had no answers of how to get out of that, that I refused to accept the natural progression of where that was going. And I started to change, and I started to seek out the help and the tools and the resources, like I found with you, that allowed me to rewrite my story and add, and not just rewrite it, but just start a whole new chapter. And it took time and it's taken work, but I have since then rebuilt myself into a man who, I mean, just the other day, I'm out with my wife and she looks at me at dinner and she says, "You make me feel so safe." And there's probably nothing for a husband that I want more than that. Love
Right.
is critical, but safety, I mean, that is fundamental to a loving and trusting relationship. My kids, when I come home, they're running, they're hiding and jumping out at me as I come in the door, you know? So, I mean, they're eagerly anticipating me coming home. The man who was beating himself up in the garage was incapable of creating that kind of environment. Even in the business today, the amount of stability and just we're able to do what we do and serve our customers and serve our people and make them feel loved and just valued in the business. Well, that's all because I was able to go through my own internal transformation and heal. And that's really what this whole thing has been about, is just healing all of the stories and the traumatic moments. And I mean, it's difficult to heal when the guy beating you up is the one looking back at you in the mirror.
I want you to speak on that for a second. What do you mean?
When you hate yourself and you can't get away from yourself, you don't have any way of moving forward because you're always there ready to trip yourself back up. You're always there. It's almost like this piece of you waiting to just remind you of how unworthy you are. But I'm recognizing and coming to recognize foundationally through faith. I mean, God changed that whole thing. If it was not for God speaking into my heart and mind in that moment, and clear as day asking me that question, I don't know that I wouldn't have just continued to go down that. And what he also planted in my mind was the realization that there was a different story that was possible. Like there was this different reality. He wasn't going to do the work, but he showed me the tools and he took me down the path that restored order to my life. And it was through coaches and finding tools and just being willing to do the work and submit in humility to what was required and what had to be done in order to heal all that and to rebuild.
I feel like that's part of what we really want to break down for our folks, right? Is in the moment of choice that presented itself when you heard that call, when God put that question inside of you and opened up that optionality, right? Because I think what we're looking at here as a theme on our show are the great leaders are the ones who take that pain and they turn it into purpose. But that's a choice. And that's a choice that not everybody makes because I don't necessarily know that everybody knows that that's a choice, right? And I also think it goes down to something that you and I talk about, right? In terms of the growth, the healing, the going on to serve based on everything you learn through the healing and growth process, is that when you actually see it as a choice, then you see it's a choice that you can make and you claim that responsibility. That's the pivot, right? Is like, that's when you become powerfully responsible.
It's so empowering to know that you've got the ability to restore that order. But we just aren't taught that as kids, and we're not taught that growing up. It's just not, there's tools and there's things that we're aware of today that just didn't exist 10, 20, 30 years ago. But now we've got the ability to fill up toolboxes, so to speak, of these mindsets and these practices and these things that just allow us to operate and navigate through stress and through, just all the pressure, and the pressure's still there. The only difference is my capacity is far surpassed the pressure I'm under every day. So it's not like, life just all of a sudden got easy or all the challenges all went away. I mean, all of that was before COVID hit, was before businesses were shut down and we had all the disruption and all that. But the work I was doing prior to that teed me up and gave me the tools to double down so that I could continue to progress, even though there was a ton of stress going on in the world over the past few years, and actually build even faster and even better through it, probably than we would have without it. It became like a catalyst, I believe, for us. But when you have these tools, you're able to grow your capacity, expand your ability, and thrive in the midst of that, and in the midst of all the anxiety and stress and pressure, rather than just being crushed by it.
That's the biggest difference, right? And that TSN turning point is you go from being the victim to the victor.
And the choice is so powerful because my experience was I didn't have a choice. My only option was going into the garage and just seeing how bad I could treat myself. Right. And then there was this moment of clarity where it's like, hold on, there's another way. I had no idea what the answer was when I decided to chase down the answer.
I know. And I kind of feel like it's a lot of people out there, right? Which is some of why you started this whole mission around the world needs men and this beautiful podcast that just launched here in January with the very same name. So will you tell our audience just a little bit about that? Because I know as being one of your biggest fans on that show, that you are doing exactly that, right? You are running men through that aspect of the journey that you went on from the moment you made that choice, right? To where you are right now, stepping into your God-given purpose so you can play your biggest impact game in all areas of leadership. You are giving them the tools, right? And empowering them with the choices that they can make on the daily so that they can see that same healing, growth, and impact in their lives. But you want to tell our audience a little bit about the World Needs Men and why you started this podcast show right now?
Absolutely. Yep. There's in my heart, there's nothing more important in my mind than for marriages and families to heal and thrive. That starts for me with a man who is able to physically, mentally, and emotionally and spiritually get healthy. He has to get healthy first so that his marriage can heal. His marriage has to heal before his family can heal. And there's no greater gift that a man can give his wife than a healthy man. There's no greater gift that a couple can give their children than a healthy marriage. Like, this is just foundational, and there's a process and a progression to this, right? And I know that there were men at the time who were speaking and sharing their truth and sharing their experience who I was able to connect to, and it gave me some hope. And it gave me some of the perspective I need. And so all that I've been through has got to be more than for just me. And I've done too much work, and I've figured too many things out to just keep it inside, because I believe when I share my story and I step out and really just lay all that out there, it creates a safe space for other men to first and foremost realize you're not alone. There are other men who feel this too, which is where we have to start. And then it allows them to find some safe space to raise their hand and share their experience and begin to seek out and find the coaching and the help, and not the, like, you're not broken. We just haven't been given the right tools to operate at a really high level. And especially talking to the leaders out there who are trying to run a business, which is very stressful, and show up as a great husband and be a dad that their kids actually want to be around, doing all of that simultaneously and not falling apart. That's very difficult. And so
Truth.
If I can share my experience and what I've been able to rebuild my life into, and the tools and the journey, and just being very real of the reality of the pressure and what that can create. And you may not be beating yourself up physically like me, but we all beat ourselves up mentally. We beat ourselves up emotionally. And it's super destructive to the people that we love. It's destructive to ourselves. We can't lead a good company if we're beating ourselves up in the garage, whether that is physical or mental. And so I just feel this great call and purpose being placed on my life, because I think other men are dealing with the same stuff too. It may be a different flavor of pain, but there's pain, and it just needs to be addressed, because it is families that suffer when men are the ones who are sick.
Why do you think? Let's explore that, because I definitely think that this is something I want my audience to be thinking about in terms of the importance of this piece, right? Like the self-leadership piece really is what we're putting the emphasis on right now, right? But what's your understanding of that piece of the puzzle? Like how the family requires this of their men?
In my mind, in my experience, and for what I see in the world, there's nothing more destructive to our society than the fatherless home. Every single statistic, and I don't even need to like roll them all out, but just go look it up. Fatherless home stats, and every bad number that you could imagine goes up. I also think and we were talking about this, I also think it's extraordinary that 80% of suicides are men. 8 out of 10 people in the US who kill themselves are male. If that doesn't point to a real problem, I don't know what does. And so you have men who are literally checking out of this world. You've also got men who are checking out of their homes and their responsibilities and what they're accountable for as men in the home. And a lot of times they just don't have the tools and they don't know how to operate. I chose to beat myself up. Other people may choose to drink or to do drugs or to chase anything else that just helps to
escape
get out of that pain. It's just an escape. And so, like, you're not broken. I think most men would not want to be classified as a deadbeat dad in general. Right. And so we don't want that, but we don't have to, but we don't know how to, like, sometimes show up better. And so it's just critical that men show up in the home to create that stability. And it's even easy, especially talking to the business leaders out there. It is very tempting and it is very easy to put all of the focus on the business and put all your effort and energy there and think, well, one day when the business is good, then I'll check in with my family. One day when the business has made it, then I'll pay attention to my wife and to my kids. But the reality is that's unsustainable. And if your body, your marriage, your family, or your spirituality falls apart, your business will be unsustainable.
Amen.
What I subscribe to is the idea that a man should be able to figure out how to be physically healthy. And that's not just physical, but mentally and emotionally as well. I want a life of purpose. I want a life where I have a relationship with God, follow Jesus Christ, and make that a foundational part of my life. I want a marriage that is just passionate and on fire, and children who want to be around me. And I also want a business that's thriving, and I want to do all those things at the same time. And when you find the right tools and you put them to work and you find coaches who can help you along, that reality is very possible and doable. And that creates a high value man who's able to change the world.
I love it. It's so true. Nothing but truth coming out of you today. This is where I want to go next, is just to help my listeners who are listening right now and are feeling that call because of what they're hearing you say. Where does that man begin to get on this journey? Like, especially for the ones who are resonating with the starting point of your story, right? The ones who don't have the tools, who don't necessarily know that the tools are a thing. Like, as somebody who has now walked that journey, having made that choice, where would you suggest that listener begin?
Surrender.
What does that mean to you?
For me, it was surrendering to God's voice and surrendering to the better possibility and the better story that he had for me than I was able to write for myself. Because the story I was writing was pretty dark and taking me down a really dark path. And I just had to surrender to whatever it was. And he brought me my first coach. And then I found another one and then another one. And, it let, like, all those dots connected to finally bring me to you and the work that we've done. But I think men have to be humble. I think they have to, surrender is about being humble and willing to just do the work and not let pride get in the way. Because, a lot of men struggle with that, with not wanting to look weak. We want to look like we've got it all figured out. We don't want to be exposed. We don't want to show any sign of
vulnerability,
inadequacy. And it's not let me just fall apart. It's a willingness to really go and look inside and give yourself the opportunity to begin to heal so that you can show up. And so it just takes a willingness to surrender to that whole process. Every step of the way, looking back from that moment in the garage, which is years ago, to now, it's been willingness to surrender all the way to the process and to the work that had to be done and what God continued to put in front of me. Even this year, I've talked a bunch, deciding on Easter this year, I'm just not going to drink alcohol anymore. And what that little thing did for me and what that's opened up for me has been extraordinary in terms of the growth that has happened and the way I've been able to just get that sedation out of my life so that I could actually feel, actually heal, and experience growth that has just been supercharged because of that one little decision I made.
And I feel like this is a piece of the puzzle that we want to talk about, because we were talking about it earlier today, right? Is like you mentioned that, all of this journey that you've been on in your hero's journey has led to this incredible capacity where you now can lead as a father, as a business leader in the community, yourself, right? You're talking about how all of the things that you did along the way in your journey are what got you to have that level of capacity. So yeah, not drinking alcohol might seem like a small choice, right? But like, that's not such a small choice when you really break it down in terms of how that impacts your nervous system, your ability to sleep properly and recover, right? So this is like where I want to go with you next, because I was listening to the show and I heard you throwing out all these awesome frameworks as only Franklin can do. One of them being the core four. I love that name, but you give these really, really like easy to digest ways for men to think about the work, right? To think about the tools and the process of growth. You want to break down some of that for my audience so that they can plug into some of how you do that?
Would it be helpful for me to just detail out my morning?
Yeah, but that's why I think
I'm trying
to give the audience a sight line just in terms of some of the more micro aspects of that journey, right? In terms of, we keep talking about the work, we keep talking about the tools. I'd like to feed them some of that.
Right. And I will say, I've not invented anything that I talk about. It's just been, all these tools that I've just been fortunate to find from other people who have gone ahead of me and found them and shared them. And so I didn't create any of this on my own. But I believe one of the most powerful things a man can do to begin to restore some order into his life is just to begin to put in some powerful and productive and positive routines and habits into his day to get him going in the right direction, in the right trajectory.
Definitely.
Every day I get up in the morning, on a simple level, one of the first things I do really is just spend time with God. I'm in some, a devotional, and then I really spend some time doing box breathing and just meditating during that time. And the box breathing is kind of an active meditation, so to speak, but very powerful, that I've done for years. Learned that when I was doing SEAL Fit from Mark Divine. He talked about that a lot. And then just spend some time journaling. A lot of time it's gratitude. There's just a number of different ways that I do journal, but I just kind of spend that first time. It's really kind of my spiritual time first thing. After that, I write a letter to my wife, my son, my daughter, and it's just a love note, and it's a note that is either one of love, honor, appreciation, or gratitude. Every day, I just write them a little note that tells them what I love about them. The powerful thing about this is what it does for you as a husband and father, even more than what it does for them. So you imagine getting married, you imagine the first day you have your child, and there's that amazing day, but then time goes on. It's like having a pair of glasses that you put on in day one. The glasses are clear, you can see perfectly through them, there's no distortion. But then after a few days, they get, kind of a couple of smudges on them. Well, then if you don't clean them a month later, like, they're getting pretty nasty. And then if you go long enough, they literally distort your ability to see at all. When you write a note of gratitude to your family every day, it's like cleaning that lens that you see them through.
Such a wonderful way to describe that.
It's like this energetic shift happens where when you write your wife a note telling her what you appreciate, it makes it a lot harder to snap at her later that morning.
Yeah, seriously.
Or it's this amazing way to connect with your kids. So I've been doing this now for years, and it's super fast. I do it really quick, but I've done it so long that there's literally hundreds and hundreds of these. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, one of the things that I believe would be the most valuable that my family would have for me is this mountain of little notes left behind, and it would have everything I've ever thought of them, and every little thing, all these moments of gratitude and all this. So that's a really powerful part of my morning that I stick to, and it just
works.
It just works. It's very simple. Everything I do is simple. The next thing I do, I'll work out. Like if you're leading a business and you're not working out every day, you're denying yourself the single greatest tool to get a handle on your mental and emotional capacity than anything else that exists. Like there's just so much that happens physically, emotionally, psychologically when you just get out and get a sweat on, whether you go for a run, lift some weights. I'm doing some jujitsu nowadays. Like that's been really therapeutic, but you've got to move your body and you've got to get some of that stress and frustration out, because men have that. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's how we process it and how we deal with it that's so important. So do it in a productive way versus a destructive way. So I do that. I drink a green smoothie, get some healthy stuff on me. And the last thing I do is I learn something. I'm either listening to a podcast, reading a book. I try to put in some really good information into my mind that helps get me just in a really positive state. And I try to figure out how can I leverage this information in my life today in some positive way. So it's not learning for learning's sake, it's learning and then leveraging that into your life to make it better. So you imagine you wake up in the morning, you spend some time with God, do some meditation, do some journaling, you write some notes to your wife and kids, you spend some time working out, getting your body primed and drink a green smoothie. While you're working out, you're listening to a podcast and you figure out how to apply some of what you learned. That human being has just shifted the entire trajectory of their day and their life. Because now you are vibrating at a very high level. You're operating at a very high and positive frequency energetically, and you take all of that positive energy now throughout your whole day. When you do that every day for a year, you will change your life, because you have, on just one day at a time, have put yourself into a position to win, to show up for the people who matter, to make better decisions, to be more courageous in your actions. And then it's hard to lose when you put yourself in a position to win every day. If you look at a different option, right? So let's call that person A, the person who does the core four, primes themselves for success. If you take person B, who oversleeps, rushes to work, grabs a Pop-Tart on their way out the door while slamming a coffee, and is all stressed, like working through traffic, and then rolls into the office late, versus the other man who got up and got himself on point. The one who got up and did the work is going to run circles around the other man. And the other man is going to wonder why he's just so unfortunate. But it's all in your daily habits. And so there's so much more to the work that I've done. But one of the most profound things that I have found is a simple and yet powerful morning routine to get every day started in the right direction, so I can show up better for my family, show up better in business. And when you compound that over time, the results are undeniable.
Whew. Amen. And I think that's what we're referencing as it pertains to capacity, right? Is that there's a compound effect when you start stacking these habits in the way that Franklin just described, is that you're growing your capacity. And the more your capacity grows, the more resilient you become, the more empowered you feel, the more unstoppable you are as a leader, right?
You build momentum, right? And so if you do this for one day or a couple of days, you will not see much of a change. If you do it for a week and then a month and then a quarter and then a year, you'll build this momentum and you'll reset your normal. Like the way you operate will change, and all of a sudden you're just at a different elevation than most people who aren't doing any or, some or any of these things every day. And when you're not putting yourself in a position where you have a lot of capacity, life just is a lot harder.
I know I can channel my audience right now saying he writes notes every single morning to every single one of his family members. How much time does this guy have? Right? Like I can just hear all of the resistance in the room, all of the typical excuses, right, that come up, protecting us from even entertaining this as a choice. Because you're right, most of us, we get stuck because we believe we don't have a choice. But this is where I want to go next is like, what do you feel like are the biggest points of resistance, the biggest roadblocks that men here in 2024 are up against in terms of the things that are preventing them from stepping into this type of existence?
There's nothing that stands between you and the man you want to be more than your own mindset.
I feel like telling you to say that again for those in the back row.
I mean, it's the stories of, oh, I can't do this. I don't have enough time. It takes too long to get to the gym. I haven't worked out in so long. I'm almost 42. I run a, fairly decent sized company. I have kids. I coach soccer. My daughter and son are involved in all kinds of stuff. I want to take my wife on date night every single week. Like everyone has a full life and you should, but you got to prioritize. If, I think 4 things I'm going to break down real quick that, we can go in any direction you want, but I see that men struggle with. The first one is sedation. We've just got things in our lives, and that doesn't have to be alcohol. You may be just binging on Netflix too much. Yeah. Right. So what are we using our time for? So if you say you don't have time, well, let's do an inventory quick. And you probably can find 5 minutes to write your wife and kids some notes. There's a really high return on investment of that exercise every day too. And so there's that. There's isolation. Like great men need, men who want to be great men need to get around other men. It is very easy as a businessman, as a leader, to feel isolated, to feel alone, and to begin doing, and I've struggled with this, I struggle to maintain friendships and to build them because I am so busy with the business. And then I want to be great for my family. And it's just easy to put that on the back burner. But it's really important that we are around other men and investing into that. So getting rid of isolation. When you think about, you ever watch National Geographic, lions isolate the food that they want to eat.
That's so good.
They're chasing the wildebeest or whatever. And I mean, they literally pick one off from the herd, isolate it, and that's where it dies.
Yeah.
And so men die in isolation all the time. The other thing is comfort. Men, we need to be willing to be a little uncomfortable. And we have to build resilience and be able to find a space where we get comfortable in the discomfort. Like there is no growth if you are comfortable all the time. And so it's not a bad thing that we just have to transform that discomfort into growth. But if we're too comfortable and this life makes it too easy to be too comfortable, we're not going to be showing up for our families the way, in our businesses, the way that needs. And the final thing is just confusion. There's too much confusion in this world and squabbling back and forth about what it means to be a man. Here's what it means to be a man. Show up and take responsibility for your wife and children and be there. Like, let's start there. Just show up and take some responsibility for the things that matter in your life. Like just that. So we get rid of the confusion, we get rid of the isolation, we get rid of the sedation, we get rid of the comfort, and then we can be productive, high value men who show up and create value in this world, create safety for women, create safety for our children, make them feel loved and supported and cherished and seen and nurtured. That is what God calls us to do. And I mean, that's my whole mission, my whole purpose is just to push that message out that is not spoken enough.
Oof. And we're so glad that you're answering this call. What role do us women play in empowering our men to step up and claim that responsibility?
Wives, you are your husband's greatest inspiration, whether you know it or not. And you have the power to build him to the greatest heights, and he will go and storm the castle and he will conquer the world. Or you can literally rip his whole world apart, all with your words. And I don't think, I think it's really powerful for wives to understand just how powerful their words are, and how much that they can be supportive of their husbands and not tear them down and not, make them feel like they're failing. And I talk to a lot of other men, and we want to be the knight in shining armor. We want to be the hero for our wives. We want to succeed and win and be the champion. And now there is, men, you need to treat your wives with honor and respect. Date your wife, buy her gifts, pay attention to her. And I'm talking to myself on this because I have to remember and remind myself every day, like that is such a profound calling on my life. So you can't expect from your wife what you're not giving first. Like, so don't complain about it, but to the question, what can women do? Like, just like be the champion for your husband and just cheer him on. And you will not believe that what will happen for him energetically. There is nothing that will drive, for me, there's nothing that drives me more than when my wife is just clapping, going, go, go, go. Like, I will crush everything in my path.
I love it. So freaking good. All right. I got to try to land this plane. But before I do, I cannot let you go until I ask you our infamous question here at the Leadership Launchpad Project. Franklin, what do you want the legacy of all this incredibly important work that you're doing on your mission to help empower men to step into that self-leadership? Yeah, and lead as men. What do you want the legacy of all of that to be?
I think of the man who I will never know, who is listening to this right now, maybe years from now, who hears one little thing that helps him shift the trajectory of his whole life and restore harmony and order to his family, and experience what I've experienced, and get to experience the fulfillment and the joy of being able to look in the mirror and be proud of the man you are and how you show up every single day. And if I can do that once, it's all worth it. So that's what I say. And I'm hopeful that it will be much more than that I impact, but I just want to share all the things that I've been so fortunate to find. Part of me is thinking, why me? Why am I the one who went down that path and was in the garage and heard God's voice and then found this path of healing and restoration and tools and all the things that I've been able to come across? Like, why me? Well, the reason is because I've now been uniquely gifted to be able to share that with other men so that they can get that benefit too. Because there are marriages that are suffering. There are families and children that are suffering because men simply don't know how to show up. They need tools. They need training. They need someone who will believe in them and show them how to do it. And I want to be one of those voices.
Oh, we're so glad that you do. I'm so honored to be sitting here as your coach right now, having had this conversation. This is a serious manifestation moment for me, sir. Thank you so much for coming in here and sharing so vulnerably, so courageously. I agree. This is when the world needs men more than it's ever needed that type of leadership, right? Like, for me, where I want to land is this. I want everybody to hear what is embedded in this story, right? Which is that your pain is your portal to your purpose. So if that doesn't feel like a call, I don't know what will, especially after today's conversation. Franklin, where would you like my audience to come and find you? Aside from the World Needs Men podcast, we're going to put that link in the show notes for damn sure. But where would you like people to reach out and find you?
We're on Instagram now at the World Needs Men. So that's probably the best spot.
All right. You know, this man's taking his mission seriously because he's on Instagram now. I love it. Franklin, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please remember before you head out today, share this episode with one of your friends, colleagues, brothers, uncle. Share this one far and wide and help us spread this ripple effect. Remember to hit subscribe to the Leadership Launchpad Project on your favorite podcast platform, wherever you happen to be listening to this right now. And for all else in the world of leadership development and training, including if you're a man out there listening to this, resonating with this message and realizing that, yeah, we are definitely a place that has those tools. You heard it from Franklin himself. So yeah, please reach out, elitehighperformance.com. We would love to have a conversation with you and lead you on that journey. Is there anything else you'd like to leave our audience with today, Franklin?
It's just a pleasure to be here.
And we definitely got to do this again for part 2 because we didn't even get through half of our questions today. So we got more to talk about for damn sure. That's it. That's all. We'll see you all next week.